That's right. Welcome to another episode of Pitch Please. Following up the big USA Mexico game. Let's go ahead and get started right away. No time to dilly dally. Let's just get to it. All right. The result. If you were living under a rock and you don't know what the result was, the US won. 2-0. 2-0. That's right. Another 2-0. I guess Texas doesn't belong to the Mexicans. Yeah, I don't know what to say. All right, it stays in the United States of America. But yeah, 2-0. A very, very good showing by the US. And honestly, it went exactly the way that I thought it would. Not the way that I said, but it went the way that I thought it would, which is a shame because we really were hoping that Mexico can pull it off. But who are we kidding? Mexico hasn't been that great in the last couple of years, especially against the US without having been able to beat on five in the last 5 years. And that just adds another game. But seeing what I saw from the selección, the decepción now, it's super pathetic the way that they played. How there was literally only one player who could have possibly made a difference, which was Chucky Lozano. And even him, he was struggling. He had the pace, he had the eagerness to get forward and try and make something happen, but he can't do it all by himself. He really is Mexico's best player. And there's a couple of things that I want to get into it when it comes down to Mexico's players. All right? The first, I know I said I love Memo Ochoa, when I brought up that 7-0 or 7-1 against Chile. But those goals against the US this last weekend, how I want to say they're his fault. All right, I'm just gonna be straight up with you. The first one, which was a banger from Tyler Adams, that boy hit that ball sweet. Maybe it had a lot of movement, yes, but I don't know. Maybe somebody else or another goalkeeper or someone younger with more reflexes and a little bit more energy maybe reacts a little bit better. But it is what it is. Ochoa was in there. He did what he could, and he just couldn't get there. Now, the second goal, I think it really was his fault. I mean, it came to his post, right? The very bottom, couldn't react fast enough. I give that one on him. But regardless, if it would have been somebody else or one of those goals would have been saved, Mexico didn't look like they were going to create anything, really. And that's just credit to what the U.S. is doing, right? But Mexico really didn't show any way of hurting the U.S. It's not like there was times where they had a keeper make a great save. The defense was able to deal with pretty much everything that the Mexican team threw at them. And that was honestly pretty sad to watch. I really identified with Osvaldo Sanchez. He was commentating on that game and everybody else was talking trash on Mexico. I mean, being realistic, going off of what they were seeing and how they saw Mexico with no idea how to get close to the goal. There was no real threat from any players, like I mentioned, other than Chucky, but even then, that wasn't that big of a threat. He was beating his man, I believe it was Robinson that was on his side, but his crosses were off. He couldn't find anybody in the box, so that was really the best opportunities that Mexico had in that game. And the commentators are saying how, Mexico is missing this, and they kind of start breaking down the federation and how or why the team is what it is and that the game was already lost. This was when they were down to 0. There was like 15 minutes left. And this is why I love my boy Osvaldo Sanchez, but he was like, oh, we never know what's going to happen. There's been miracles. Nunca se sabe qué va a pasar in the last minute. Like, with just one goal, they could get back into it. And he was just, I'm sure he was speaking for a lot of us Mexican fans when the game was down to 0 and just having that glimmer of hope that which truly is the last thing that we lose when all the cards are down and the cards are stacked against us. Maybe though that what if the one slight possibility, and give a mad respect for that, but I honestly didn't see how it was gonna happen based off of how the team was playing. Yeah, not much. I'm gonna go ahead and get into a couple other things that I find interesting about this whole game. Santi Jimenez. All right, he's been a huge topic and a huge talking point of many people. And honestly, I don't know why they have him on the bench. I mean, I can take a guess and say that the Federation has its favorites like every team does. But especially with Mexico, I think it's been shown in the last couple of years again with Memo Ochoa being in the goal with certain players. There are certain players that the Federation tends to push. And one of the examples is even when it happened against with Memo Ochoa in the World Cup when Conejo started over him when Ochoa was probably like in his prime. Right. And everybody's wondering like how is Conejo starting over Ochoa? And now it's the same with how is Ochoa starting over other players. But it really comes down to I think the networks that run the soccer federation in Mexico and how they tend to push like they have their own agenda, honestly. And I came to see it today with Eric Sanchez from Pachuca, how there was a team interested from Europe and Pachuca was asking for $20 million. Like, dude, who's gonna pay $20 million for a player in Mexico who's like mid-20s, especially a team from Europe? They overprice them and they don't let players leave. I am sidetracking. But staying in Mexico, there's certain groups of people that run the federation who have their own agenda of players that they want to see, players that they push. And honestly, that comes to show that it's not the way that things work. And it sucks because then we have things like this happen. And apparently there was going to be a lot of changes, since the last time that the US beat Mexico, which was that 3-0, and then now with this another 2-0. And there it comes to show like we haven't been able to even score on the US, dude. And that kind of shows the levels of the where each team is at. And with Mexico, I heard during the game, right, that Mexico had, I believe, 13 players from the Liga MX on the squad. And the US, they had, you know how many players they had from the MLS? They had 2 players, and they were both on the bench, meaning that literally every player that was playing the starting 11, they were all from teams out in Europe. So that comes to show what I kind of touched on in the last episode, right, leading up to this game of how Mexican players tend to go to Europe, but they don't stay. They end up coming back. And apparently, one of the big changes that we're going to make is that they were going to send out like 20 or 30 or who knows how many players like every winter transfer window to Europe. But we just don't see it, right? We don't hear from it. Players, the only thing that we hear is players going down and then coming back, like I mentioned before. And it honestly needs to stop, man. Like, I don't know what they need to do, but they got to figure something out because it's frustrating. It's annoying. And I know I was backing up the team, but those of you guys just listening, I'm wearing a USA soccer jacket. I don't know what you want to make of that. I got the blonde hair going. I'm not blonde, but once you see the video, which, by the way, I will be uploading a video version of this on YouTube soon. I have the other 2 episodes. I've been working on them, just doing some editing, which I know nothing about. Brand new to all this, like I mentioned on my first episode. But hey, I'm learning. I'm trying to get it out there. For now, it's just on these podcast platforms. Which, by the way, I'm gonna do a little plug right now, if you don't mind. It's I have the podcast is gonna be out on. It's out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. All right, the audio version is on YouTube, but soon I will be releasing the video because I am recording and do have a camera as well, right? So I got that going. For now, I'll be pushing the audio versions of the podcast again on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, the audio version. But soon I will be pushing out the video. They're not going to be super crazy edits. It's just something basic, something to kind of get it going so you guys can see as well. Because I feel like watching, you do get a little bit of a different experience. I was mentioning something to my buddies and he was like, oh, where's the video? I need to see the video. Because like I'm more of a visual learner, stuff like that. He was like, I can't just listen. He was like, I need to see. There's just people that are used to that and some people need that. So I'll be pushing that out as well. All right. With that being said, the only way that I see things changing with the Mexican Federation if people stop purchasing, stop buying tickets, stop buying merch, and just stop going to games, right? With the whole, with that homophobic chant that they tend to do when the goalkeepers are kicking it out, and people do that as a sign of frustration, but until they're losing and in the end of the game, hey, what if, crazy idea, right? We go to the game. I know I just said it's not buy tickets or whatever and show up, but give me a sec. Let me finish my train of thought. Right? You go to the game, and instead of waiting until they're losing 2-3-0 to do the chant and stop the game, because you know how they have the whole protocol we're gonna bring the players in, make the announcement. If it happens again, then we're gonna stop the game. How about we do that from the freaking beginning of the game, dude? Send out a message like a sign of protest. I know it'd be a waste. I don't know if that would work, but to get that many people behind it. But honestly, hey, maybe that'll work, as a sign of protest. Maybe just decide on one game, you go to it, make like a Facebook group or something, put it on social media, and I don't know, and that they're gonna have no other choice than to freaking follow the protocol that's in place for the chant. And I think that's one way that maybe we can do something as a fan to show the federation that enough is enough. Maybe like as a way of protesting this, man, because it's gotten ridiculous in the last so many years that we can't beat the US and we can't make it past the freaking fourth game in the World Cup, and it's crazy. That's all the people want, man. We can't give it them because people are fucking greedy and they're just in their own little world in Mexico and they want to just be in control and in charge of everything and be in charge of the players. But that's not the way that it works. So that's my call to action to Mexican fans, Stop buying their merch. I know the parents, the abuelitos, I love it. They want the jersey. Well, tell them, you know what? Nel pastel, güey. Boycott the shit out of the fucking federation, man. Stop giving them money. Cause as long as they're still getting money, they're not going to give a damn the fucking results. They're not going to care what happens because money talks. And as long as we're still talking to them with money, they're going to keep doing whatever the fuck they want. And that shit needs to stop. Now, flip the coin. Turn the page to the US. They are doing an extremely amazing job with the way that they manage players, the way they develop players. And one of the things that they mentioned during the game was, comparing the infrastructure that the US has compared to Mexico. And I think that's true, And it comes down to the way that the country is ran, I believe, with the economy and the money that goes into developing and just kind of helping players and stuff. Yeah, it is a pay-to-play system here in the US, and I know a lot of people complain about that. How playing club is just if you have the money, and it truly is, but if you think about it, in Mexico, it's not that far from it. At least here in the US, academies and clubs, it's up front, right? Whereas in Mexico, the players who have paid 10s, 20,000 pesos to just join a team, right? And if you haven't heard about it, you should really look into it because it's very interesting. A player can just show up. They could be the shittiest player and be like, oh, here's 20,000 pesos. I want to make my debut in the first division, right? In the Pro League and the Liga MX. And they'll be like, all right, take the cash, boom, set on that under the table. And whether that guy ends up having a good career or not, whether he's just decent or not, they'll get him to that point, and then it'd be like up to you, man, whether you put in the effort or not, or whether you succeed or not. You paid us to make you have your debut, and you got it, And that's the case in a lot of players. I've heard of teams where the coach would take a percentage. I don't know what teams was, but the coach would take a percentage from the wages of the players that they would get paid in order for them to play, right? It would be like, oh, you want to play? Like, you got to give me 20% of every paycheck that you get. And that's how the fucking coaches would deal with the team, Like, you can't pay me, you don't have the money to pay me for this month? I guess you're not playing. Whoever was paying is the one that would be playing, man. And it's crazy. Whereas here in the US, like I said, at least for the clubs, it's like upfront, like, oh, you got to pay to play. Like, everybody knows that system. Zlatan has talked about it with his kids. He was paying $2-3 grand a year for his kids to just be part of the academy here in LA, and that it was expensive and compared to Europe and other places. Now, I don't know too much about Europe, but from what I've heard is that if they see talent in you and they want to make you succeed, and this is just based off of stuff that I've seen, my source, would be, trust me, bro, trust me. That's my source for this. But yeah, if you're talented and you have the work ethic, the teams and the academies will invest in you, right? Where here in the US, it's kind of the opposite. Even in Mexico, like, oh, we pay this much money and then, like, I'll play. But yeah, the infrastructure here in the US, you have the facilities, you have the coaching, the nutrition, and everything. And it's pretty well set up for them to succeed. And I think that's fundamental in getting players to develop correctly and with the right attitude and the right basics to then go out of overseas and succeed and stay there. And I mean, we can compare with Christian Pulisic, right? I'm sure he was. I think I would say he was found unsuccessful, right, at Chelsea. But whereas other players might have given up and like taken, I'm gonna say the easy way out. But maybe what if he would decided to come back to the MLS? Like, yo, Europe wasn't for me. I took my shot. I played. I'm cool with that. I'll come back to the MLS now and I'll continue my career here. But he didn't, right? He went to another team. He's at AC Milan now. And there's been players in Mexico that have taken the lead. They're not maybe so successful, but they decided to come back. And then what's the main reason that they decided to come back is the freaking money. I think people are paying they're paying too much to these players, these high profile players in Mexican teams. They're paying way too much money. They're giving them the wage that stops them from wanting to stay in Europe and find a successful career out there. So I think that's one of the main issues that we have when it comes to these players who have potential, who have the talent to be out in Europe, but end up getting drawn back home to Mexico because of the wages that these teams are offering. Because at the end of the day, the teams that get put together in Mexico with these players, right? They're like, yeah, they're really talented and good players, but they're playing in Mexico, getting high wages. Those are the teams that then come to the selección, and then those are the players, excuse me. Those are the players that end up making part of the selección, which people see them as, yeah, they're very talented and high-rated players. But then why can't they compete against the teams like the USA? Because the level of the Mexican league is completely different to what is playing in Europe. And it's literally with the level that all these guys playing for the US are used to. And maybe these guys had the experience in Europe that are taking part in Mexico, but that was maybe a few years ago or who knows how long ago, whereas the USA players are constantly and currently actively being at that level. Whereas the players that are with Mexico, they're coming from a level playing in the Liga MX, which does not compare to that in Europe. So I think that's one of the big issues that we're having in Mexico, is that these teams pay these guys, these high profile players, way too much, that they decided to just conform to the money and the easy life in Mexico than being out in Europe. And I think more players need to take that chance and stay out in Europe, ignore these teams, But then that could also tie into maybe they're offering them these high wages and they're like, and we'll get you a place in the Mexican national team, And I mean, I think every player has a dream of representing their country. I think that's also part of like, how do you call it, a bribe? But yeah, in a way, it's a bribe. Like, oh, we'll pay you this amount of money, and you'll be able to play for Mexico instead of being in Europe. Like, that would be a pretty decent offer to make. And honestly, that's where I feel like some of these players end up in Mexico. Like Uriel Antuna. I don't know business has landed in Mexico, but like, do we not? Like, is that the best that we have again? But why? Because these high-profile players come to the Liga MX. All right, but that's my rant on the Mexico situation. How do we do to fix it? Again, as a call to action to the Mexican fans, stop buying the merchandise. And I know it's kind of in a way bad for business, because I do work in a soccer store. So, and we sell Mexico stuff. But yeah, if you're gonna buy, at least buy from us, right? Don't go elsewhere. Don't buy from Mexico unless you buy from us. It's not a play. I'm not sponsored. I just work there. Anyway, on to our next topic. The USA. All right, I'm gonna go out on the limb right now and say that the USA is gonna finish top 4 in the World Cup 2026. That's right. You heard it here first, folks. And if you haven't, then you better have heard it here first. If you don't, stop listening to those other places. I don't know where you're getting your news from, but right here, I'm calling it the USA is finishing top 4 in the World Cup. And Mexico, I don't even think Mexico's going to make it out of the group stage, if I'm honest. From what I've seen, I don't even want to see how they do in the Copa America, because it's going to be pretty sad. And then they're really going to be La Decepción Mexicana. Although I'm pretty sure that's where they're at. But yeah, 2-0, another one. I remember when the 2-0 first came out. I think it was they beat the US beat Mexico 2-0. I think it was in Columbus, Ohio. I think. I believe Osvaldo Sanchez was in my goal, and the reason that 2-0 came and like stuck around and was such a big deal, because again, the US had never beat Mexico, right? Not that they had never beat them, but Mexico would usually get the best of them. But nowadays, it's completely topsy-turvy. Now, whenever Mexico beats the U.S., it's going to be the whole 2-0, because Mexico won. We're going to fucking celebrate it like it's a big deal, which in these times, I guess it fucking is, because we can't beat the U.S., right? But let me know. Once you guys see the YouTube video, what do you think of my blonde hair? It's all natural. But yeah, the USA finishing top 4 in the World Cup. Who else is going to finish top 4? We got the U.S. Who else? I think freaking France probably will be again. So USA, France, and just because I'm a fan of Ronaldo and all the Portugueses, I'll say Portugal. So France, U.S., Portugal, and you know what? I think it's Japan's time. Japan to make a little further. They're doing things well. All right, so that's my final four prediction for the World Cup 2026: France, Portugal, the U.S., and Japan. Well, there you have it, folks. My way too early FIFA World Cup 2026 predictions for the top four. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe, and stay tuned for the video versions of the podcast that will be available soon on YouTube. I appreciate you and your time. Take care. Peace.